In this session, we will try to demonstrate how we can consume ASP.NET Web Services in Ajax. Now, in normal scenarios, what happens is basically you have a browser. That means you have your Ajax code running in the browser. Then you have your ASP.NET behind code, and the ASP.NET behind code consumes the web services. So basically, the Ajax makes calls to the behind code, and the behind code basically makes calls to the web service. Now, what we're trying to demonstrate here is that the Ajax will directly call the web service method. It will directly consume web services. A JavaScript proxy will be generated which can be consumed by Ajax. So in other words, the ASP.NET behind code will play a very little role in communicating between the Ajax controls as well as the web services. So here's what we're going to demonstrate. Basically, we are going to flourish customer data on a combo box using the Ajax web service. So the Ajax web service will directly talk with the customer web service, and it will flourish this combo box. And when anyone selects the customer, it will populate the relevant informations on the text box. So for example, when I select Shyam, it populates me where he stays and what kind of occupation he is performing. So let's try to see that in order to complete this sample, what things we need to do, or what are the steps we need to perform. So the first step is basically to create the customer class. So we have created a simple customer class here which has 4 properties: customer ID, first name, address, and designation. And for each of these properties, we have the necessary set and get methods, or the necessary set and get properties. And this customer class we have then consumed in our web service. So I have exposed two web methods here. One which gives out the complete customer collection, and the second one is that second one more function I'm exposing, which is basically going to help me find the customer by the ID. So in this web service, what I'm doing initially in the constructor is basically I am loading hard-coded predefined data. So I have in the same web service, I have encapsulated a list of customers, a generic list of customers, and in the constructor I am loading hard-coded data in the web service, and then by using these functions I am going to return back this list to the end client. So 2 functions, one which returns the complete list and the other one which returns the list as per the ID. And I'm exposing this function then through my ASMX. So you can see that the simple ASMX, which is basically pointing towards the behind code of my customer.cs. So that's the web service we have. 2 functions exposed by the web service: load customers, which basically returns the list of customers, and the second one is load single customers, which takes in the customer ID and gives back to you one record or one single customer from the collection. Now, in order to consume the web service, that is customer.asmx, which we have recently created in Ajax, we need to use the ASP service reference tag. Now, the ASP script manager who is completely responsible to consume the service. So we are in the ASP script manager, we are defining the services tag, and we are defining the ASP service reference and the path, and this path is currently pointing towards the customer.asmx of our web application. So that's the first step we need to do. Now once we do this step, basically when your application runs, it generates a JavaScript proxy which can be consumed directly in your client code. Now once you consume the ASMX path in your ASP service reference, it generates a customer proxy object at the client side, and this customer proxy object, which is pointing towards the web service, you can now make direct calls by using this customer proxy object. So you can see that I have created a simple JavaScript function here called as function load all. Now this load all function basically will fill all the customers what we have in the customer.asmx into our combo box. So I'm calling up the customers.loadCustomers method here. Now if you remember, this load customers method is nothing but basically it was our load customers function which was of the web service. Now we need to provide 3 important functions to this load customers method. The first function is nothing but the function which will be called back once the web service returns data. So when you call the load customers method and it returns back you a list of customers, this list of customers will be returned to this function. So in other words, it will be like a callback, or it will be like a function which will be executed after the data after the data is fetched from the web service. So the load customers to select option will have a fill. I have defined a fill variable here, and this fill variable I am looping and I am filling my combo box. Also, to the same load customers function, I have defined two other functions. So one function which says that in case there are errors, how do you want to handle it? So I have a function error handler. So at this moment, in case there are errors, I will just concatenate the SOAP exception what I'm getting, and I will just put an alert of the JavaScript. And the final one is the timeout handler function. In case there are timeouts, then how do you want to handle it? So you can see that there is a timeout handler method also. If I want to also, if you remember, in the same ASMX, I had defined one more function which was load single customers. So even I can make method calls to the load single customers by using the same proxy object load single customers, and I'm passing the cust ID, and then again I am defined a callback function here called as get single customer function, JavaScript function, which is called back once the method is returned or once the data is returned from the web service. And at this moment we have to display one record. So basically we first get a reference of the text box, and we are then filling up, we are then pointing the property towards the text boxes. So you can see that I defined two text boxes, address ID and designation. So I get the reference by using the document object of JavaScript, and then I use the address and the designation property of my customer class. So if you remember, there was a address and the designation property, and these both designation property value are then pushed to the text boxes. So you can see that we are making direct method calls from the JavaScript to the web service. So that's my project over here. You can see. So I'm referencing. So let me just show you the demo. So basically this combo box is filled when the page loads. So if you see the behind code of this code, if you see the ASPX code of this ASPX code, on the onload event I'm calling the load all method, and the load all method then calls the load customers, and that's how this combo box fills. Now when I select anything on this, basically it goes again to the web service, it passes the ID and flourishes the single customer data. So in the combo box change, so you can see that over here in the combo box change I am calling the select specific customer function, and the select specific customer function makes a method call to the load single customers method of the web service. So this is how we this is how we can consume the web services using Ajax into our client code. I hope that this session was useful, and see you in the coming up sessions.